He almost didn't open the door that night, not because he wasn't ready, but because he'd already convinced himself that love was something people like him didn't get to have anymore. The single dads, the broken ones, the men who'd lost too much and learned to keep their hearts locked behind chores, bills, and bedtime stories. But when the doorbell rang, soft, hesitant, like a question, something inside him whispered, "Maybe tonight's different." He took a deep breath, smoothed his shirt, and opened the door. And then froze, because the woman standing on his porch, nervous smile, rain on her lashes, holding a small purse like a shield, looked up at him and said, almost apologetically, "Hi, I'm Emily. I'm so sorry I'm late. My kids are waiting in the car." For a moment, neither of them moved. The sound of rain filled the space between them, steady and soft. Kids. He hadn't expected that. The dating app hadn't said anything about children. And he, Jake, had barely figured out how to manage his own little girl. He was a mechanic, a part-time dad, full-time survivor. His ex-wife had left 2 years ago, and since then, every day had been a quiet war between exhaustion and hope. Still, something about Emily's tone, gentle but worn, made him step aside. "Come in," he said, rougher than he meant. She hesitated, as if weighing whether she should, then nodded and stepped in, bringing with her the faint scent of lavender and rain. He offered her a towel. She offered a grateful smile. And for a few moments they stood there, two people pretending this was just another first date, when both knew it was so much more than that. Jake poured coffee, while Emily looked around his small but tidy house. Toys in a corner, a drawing of a truck taped to the fridge, a photo of a little girl missing her 2 front teeth. "She's yours?" Emily asked, softly. "Yeah, that's Lily. 6 going on 16. He smiled despite himself. Emily smiled back, but her eyes flickered, just for a second, with something like sadness. "I have 2, a boy and a girl. They're in the car because I didn't want to, well, bring chaos to a first date." Jake chuckled quietly. "Chaos is kind of my normal." They talked, slowly, hesitantly, but the words began to find rhythm. Shared stories about bedtime tantrums, cold dinners, school meetings, and the loneliness that no one talks about. By the time an hour passed, something shifted. They weren't strangers anymore. They were two people who understood what it meant to give everything and still feel like it wasn't enough. Outside, the rain eased. Emily glanced toward the door. "I should get them. They'll wonder where I went." Jake hesitated, then said, "Bring them in. It's cold out there." A few minutes later, 2 small figures appeared in his doorway. A shy little girl clutching a worn teddy bear, and a boy with messy hair and cautious eyes. Lily peeked out from behind the hallway, curiosity bright in her face. For a few awkward moments, the kids just stared at one another like wild animals, unsure of territory. Then the boy said, "Is that your toy truck?" Lily nodded. "Want to see my toolbox?" He did. And just like that, the tension dissolved. The kids laughed, talked, made a mess, and for the first time in a long while, Jake's house felt alive again. He looked at Emily. She was watching the children with that same quiet ache he'd seen in his own mirror. "It's been hard," she admitted softly, "since their father passed." Jake's heart sank. "I'm sorry." She nodded. "It's okay. We manage. But sometimes I worry they'll forget what family feels like." Jake's throat tightened. "Maybe family isn't about who's missing. Maybe it's about who stays." Emily looked at him, eyes glistening. "You really believe that?" "I have to." The words hung there,
Simple, raw, and real. Weeks passed. One date turned into another. Coffee turned into dinner. Lily started calling Emily's kids her storm friends because they first met in the rain. Jake and Emily never said they were falling in love, but they didn't have to. It showed in the way she'd brush her fingers against his when she handed him coffee, in the way he'd fix her car without being asked, in the laughter of their children echoing through the house like music neither of them thought they'd hear again. Still, love isn't simple. There were days when Jake panicked, wondering if he was replacing someone he could never measure up to. Days when Emily pulled away, scared that happiness was too fragile to trust. One night, after a small argument over something neither of them would remember later, Jake found himself sitting on the porch alone, staring into the dark. Lily came out and sat beside him, her tiny hand slipping into his. "Daddy, are you mad at Miss Emily?" He sighed. "No, sweetheart, just confused. Mommy used to say that sometimes people need time to heal before they can hold hands again." "She said that?" "Yeah, I think Miss Emily's still healing." He pulled her close, kissed her head, and realized something he hadn't before. This wasn't about being ready. It was about being kind enough to wait. A few days later, Emily came by with her kids. She was nervous, holding something wrapped in brown paper. "I wanted to give you this." Jake unwrapped it and froze. It was a drawing. 3 children and 2 adults standing in front of a little house. Underneath, in shaky crayon letters, it said, "Our family." He looked at her, speechless. She swallowed hard. "I told them it might be too soon, but they said it felt right." Jake smiled, a slow, trembling smile that came from somewhere deep inside him. He set the drawing down, stepped closer, and said quietly, "Then let's not make them wait." She nodded, eyes wet. He pulled her close, and for the first time in years, Jake didn't feel like a man trying to fix what was broken. He felt like a man finally being given permission to build something new. Sometimes, love doesn't arrive with fireworks or fate. It knocks softly on a door you almost didn't open. And when it does, it reminds you that family isn't always who you start with. It's who you choose to stay with, through the rain, the fear, and the hope of one more tomorrow.